ռուսաց լեզուների թարգմանիչը, ինչպես միշտ մեր հաղորդումը վարում է Տիկին Ջեն Գոլդենբերգը, մեր շրջանի ELD կազմակերպիչը, եթե ցանկանում եք այս ամենը լսել հայոց լեզվով, խնդրում եմ ձեր էկրանների վրայի գլոբուսը սեղմեք եւ մտեք թարգմանության սենյակ։ Շնորհակալություն, բարի վայելում։ Back to you, Jen.
Thank you. And whoops, can you hear me? Okay, yes, I'm unmuted on one computer, muted on another. I'm confused. Nuria, could you please?
Yes, just you know how to get me out of the room afterwards, correct?
I believe so.
Okay. Buenos días a todos. Yo soy Nuria Lundberg y voy a ser su intérprete del idioma español esta mañana. Y bueno, esta es nuestra última junta de DELAC del año. Y bueno, la manera en que ustedes pueden accesar al canal del idioma español es buscando un mundo color gris en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla. Y ahí lo presionan, inmediatamente van a mi canal. Yo no voy a poder interactuar así como estoy ahorita. Entonces, cualquier cosa que necesiten en el chat, ustedes pueden poner sus preguntas o comentarios para mí y yo con mucho gusto los voy a traducir para todos. Y bueno, sin más por el momento, espero que les guste mi interpretación esta mañana.
Thank you. And for some reason, Armenian's not it's not showing up, Anna, so I'm just going to choose Russian. I could say I know it's weird because it does show up when we do other district meetings. So
you know why? Because the link you sent me, the special interpreter link, it says English and Russian. It doesn't say Armenian.
I couldn't choose.
Oh.
Huh. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm sending them into the interpreter rooms, I guess you can call it. And if you'd like to get translation, you can join them. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone. I think I forgot to introduce Dr. Robin Anders. He's online. He's on. Did I introduce you, Robin? You don't know. Okay, so Dr. Anders is here. He's going to talk to us about LCAP in just a minute. Let's look at the agenda today. We have the approval of the proposed agenda and approval of the minutes. I see 1, 2,
4 parents. No,
3, 4 parents. Okay, if we can get 5 more parents, then we can approve this. So, sorry, it's just funny. So we're going to go over the LCAP, then talk about it's one of our legal requirements in the state to talk about the plan to ensure compliance with instructional assistant requirements. So we already have a plan in place. I'll just explain it. And then you can ask questions or give feedback. Then Nuria will present about the buddy system, and Mona is not able to be here, so I'll talk about the welcome fair. So we are going to start. No, can't do minutes. I'm going to stop sharing and allow Dr. Anders to share. Hang on, hold on. And okay, you should be able to share now, Dr. Anders.
Thank you. Give me 1 second.
I thought I was speaking slowly, Anna.
I think she's saying it to Dr. Anders.
Okay.
We said 1 second. 1 second. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Robin Anders, Director of Instructional Technology and Accountability for the district. Happy to be here this morning. We just had an LCAP meeting last night, so you're getting information that was just shared publicly this morning. And the information that we went over last evening was an update to our budget for the LCAP, which is called our supplemental budget. And so that's what I'll be sharing today with you all. So this slide is a summary of our supplemental LCAP budget. There's a couple things to point out. If you look at the top of this slide, you can see 3 column headers. First one being budgeted. So this was our anticipated budget for this school year. The next one is first interim. This is an update to our budget that takes place in October, November, where we estimate how much we will spend in our budget through the school year. The last column is second interim, which just came out in March. And this is, again, an update to our budget with projections on where we think we will end the school year with our budget. So again, these are not saying how much we've spent at that point in the year. This is looking at our expenditures and projecting where we think we will end at the close of the school year. This slide summarizes our expenditures and our budget, and it breaks it down by goal 1, goal 2, and goal 3. We have 4 goals in our LCAP. The 4th goal, we do not spend any of our supplemental funds to meet that goal. That's met through general fund or bond goals or bond monies. But we do spend in our LCAP budget to make progress towards our goal 1, 2, and 3. The majority of that spending is in goal 1, which is our instructional goal. The next goal with the most spending is goal 2, educational services. And then we have some expenditures in goal 3. Our projected expenditures are about 12.5 million. You can see the carryover has remained consistent. For the most part, we saw a slight decrease at first interim and held steady. Our projected revenues has held consistent through the school year. And then our projected carryover for next year, this is the important piece, and that's that last line, is we initially budgeted about 850,000 in carryover funds. So this is money that has been carried over from previous years that we are continuing to spend down. At first interim, our projections were a little higher than what we budgeted, but now at second interim, we're back to square. And we're right on pace to have the anticipated carryover amount for next year. So the next set of slides breaks down what this slide summarized. So this is actually breaking down by specific action items within each goal. And again, we have the same headers of what we budgeted, where our spending was projected to be at first interim back in October, and where our projected spending is currently in March, and where we think we'll end the year. Throughout all of these slides, you'll notice that some of these dollar amounts have gone up a little bit in most categories. That's in part that our bargaining units negotiated a 3.5% raise. Most of that is part of next year's budget. They've negotiated that raise for next year. However, they also negotiated retroactive pay, which takes place this school year, and it comes out of this year's budget. So some of these items have increased because we are paying out of this year's budget that retroactive pay for staff this year. You may also see some places where the dollar amount is less than what we budgeted, or where we were at first interim. That typically means we've had a vacancy and there was a period of time where that position was unfilled and we didn't have to pay a salary, or we've filled that position with a new staff member that's lower on the salary schedule, and so does not cost as much as the previous personnel in those positions.
Robin, can I
Yeah.
ask a question? So it says elementary ELD specialist, 3 FTEs. And the cost has
Should
gone up a
say
lot.
4. That
Exactly.
should say 4, yes. Yeah, I
Thank you.
think that happened at some point in the year, so that item is still where we started the year, but at this point in the year, that should say 4. That's correct. So, and she was talking about this second item here, 3 FTE. That should be 4 FTE. Outside of that, this slide stayed pretty consistent with what we projected, where we've had a need for additional interpretation, and so we're projecting that we will spend more than what was budgeted to do that, and that's a valuable service to our families, so we don't mind making sure we provide that service. Again, all of these items are part of goal 1, which is our instructional goal in our LCAP. But again, pretty consistent with what we anticipated through all of these. The next slide is still goal 1. So these are all instructional items. And again, we stayed pretty consistent with what we anticipated for expenditures. You can see our psychologist has increased at the middle school. Those funds have increased throughout the year. We have some very highly qualified staff serving in that role. Same with behavior specialists. And again, that they also received that negotiated increase in pay. Library coordinators, I want to point out, it says 6.94 FTEs. That is full-time equivalent, but it's actually 11 people in those positions at our 11 elementary sites. So each site has a dedicated library coordinator. They just don't work a full-time position. But if you added all 11 positions together, they're the equivalent of almost 7 full-time employees. Moving to goal 2, you see our items that we fund under goal 2. Again, goal 2 is our ed services or educational services goal, supporting the whole child in their education. A couple items here to worth noting that are variables outside of what I've already explained would be the Family Services Agency of Burbank. At first interim, this number increased. At the very beginning of the year, we identified that 30,000 would not be enough to fund the needs of our students. So we increased this pretty early on in the school year. And so you can see that balance has continued, or those expenditures have continued through the year. It's valuable at all of our sites, especially our secondary sites, to provide counseling, drop-in services, all kinds of opportunities for students to get what they need when it comes to mental health. The last item, secondary summer school, has been discussed in the winter and recently sort of executed, so to speak, as far as communicating what our summer school plans are. And the interesting piece about summer school is that it is split funded from last year's budget and this year's budget and the following year's budget, depending on what summer we're talking about. What I mean by that is that this year's LCAP in this year's budget pays for the month of July from last summer and the month of June for this coming summer. So the expenditures you see here in that second interim and first interim, those are, for the most part, expenditures that occurred in July of 2023. And so we're still well below what we thought, but most of that is because of what we've already provided to our students last summer. This next slide, you see we come in significantly under what we budgeted and where we were at first interim. And the reason is most of this is still from July, but we've already executed a significant changes to our summer school program this summer. And so we will not have those same expenditures in June that we've traditionally had. Again, families are receiving that information. Most of our summer school courses or opportunities are outside of BUSD, and that allows us to save that money in our budget. And we are using that money to try and restore some positions for next year during the school year. So that's a significant change that's allowing us to balance next year's budget. Otherwise, other things on here stayed consistent. The PBIS training is a training that we had completed with LACO. We did have the opportunity to still consult with them or request additional training or services. We've decided to save that money for next year and not take advantage of any continuing training from LACO. But the PBIS program is still strong and healthy in the majority of our schools. Last slide here for our budget update is goal 3. And these items have stayed consistent from first interim to second. The two areas where we have identified we can save money or not spend that budgeted amount is PD on diversity, equity, inclusion, specifically our Facing History program, which we completed with CTA. That's California Teachers Association. That is done, and we again had the opportunity to follow up with additional training, but we've decided to save that money since we completed the scope and sequence of their training. The second one, DEI Mental Health Consultant. This is a position specifically for helping students with emotional, social needs that are in the context of equity and inclusion and diversity. That position had been unfilled. We've been able to provide those services elsewhere. At this point in the year, we've determined we will not fill that position, will remain vacant, and be able to save that dollar amount to help balance next year's budget as well. So those are our action items and where we are at second interim that allows us to stay consistent with our projected carryover amount of about $850,000, which is really vital to next year's budget, that we have that carryover. As you can see, we've made a lot of adjustments. These are all items that we've looked at and discussed to remove for next year in 24-25. And so this carryover was critical. In last night's meeting, it was brought up, what about 25-26? So we've made the adjustments to the plan for next year. What about the year after that? That's a really good question, because in next year's budget, we're planning to spend all of this carryover and all of our revenues next year, which means we will not have carryover at the end of next year. So what that means for 25-26 is we're going to have to look at eliminating another $850,000 out of our LCAP budget, because we will not be seeing carryover money in 25-26. So again, we're good for next year. Next year, we're solid. We've already discussed where we can trim, where we can reduce spending. But just kind of keeping this in the back of our minds, when next year comes, we'll have to start this process over and talk about how we can reduce again to be solvent for 25-26. Not by this amount, not by 1.8 or 1.2, but by at least 850,000. So last piece I want to share is what we've discussed is we reduced by more than what we had to. So we had to reduce by 1.2 million to be solvent with our budget. We've actually reduced by 1.8. We found ways to reduce costs. And so we're reallocating about 600,000 in the LCAP, and the majority of that is to help our English learners as we've seen significant increase in that population. We've also seen significant increase in services because we are now supporting multiple languages in classrooms, not just Spanish and Armenian. And we're also supporting families that are new to the country that have more needs than just English language acquisition. They also need to be more familiar with our American school system, our community, and just getting settled into what it is to be a Burbank Unified student. So we're looking at all these options. The majority of that funding is to reduce class sizes at secondary, specifically middle school. We already do this in English, and we're looking to in science so that we can better support our English learner cohorts in those core curriculum classes. We're designating an additional 220,000 at the elementary to provide additional instructional aids, translators, and other services or devices to help with that population as well. This last piece of reallocation is a small amount to be able to sustain a fraction of our summer school program, to be able to support special ed students who need to recover credits. So that's where we're reallocating based on our reduction, I guess our over reduction, and how we can reinvest some of those funds for next year.
Great. I see that Kristen has her hand up. Robin, is this a good point for questions?
Yeah, that was my last slide.
Perfect.
Cool. I just wanted a little more information about the 220,000 on the last slide.
Yep.
About adding more English learner development supports, especially like how you envision that looking. I know you mentioned just now translation and instructional assistance. Is this something that we're going to be able to provide feedback on, or have you guys already kind of sorted out what you want it to look like?
No, we're looking for feedback. Honestly, we anticipate we will try to spend this money on instructional aids and translators first. That's our top priority. What we know in practice is that we've had a hard time filling those positions. And what we don't want to do is restrict ourselves only to funding that, and then having money unspent because we couldn't fill those positions. So we're leaving this somewhat generic intentionally, so that when we write our LCAP, we can include a kind of a smorgasbord of things that we can use or spend that money on, so that if we cannot fill those positions, we have other ways or other mechanisms to fund to support. So that could look like devices or translation programs or resources, textbooks, materials,
staff development. It's wide open.
I love it. The only thing that I would add to it is I think one of the reasons why we have such a hard time filling
Slow down. Sorry.
sorry. One of the concerns, which I know, is, I'm not sure how much control any of us have over this, is how much we pay our ELD instructional assistants. And these positions remain open for months and months because there's such a small amount of hours or because of the sorry.
Translation.
That's something that it would be great if we could look into, perhaps paying them a higher salary so that we could get more qualified people and more applicants.
And all that's negotiated. And then once you raise possibly one classification, it impacts possibly other classifications. So we need to be judicious about all that too. So it's not a no, it's just, we have to be conscious.
I gotcha.
It's a puzzle.
And I think you, Kristen, though, the making sure it's a full-time position or the hours that we have more flexibility with to be able to attract candidates.
That would be great. Thank you.
Great question. But yes, so all of this team and your colleagues and our parents, please provide ideas. We want to create a pretty extensive menu of how we can support these learners so that we can pivot with these funds during the year if necessary to make sure they're being spent on this population. But again, our priority would be to provide the staffing.
Thank you very much, Robin. Does anybody else either here in the boardroom or on Zoom have any questions?
I see one more thing.
Sure, go ahead.
Just
Kristen.
really quickly, we do tend to use some of our Title III funds for translation. And I know that that's allowed, but I would love to be able to, at my non-translation requirement schools, get funding from a different source, perhaps this 220,000 to pay for translations, so that we could use our Title III money for our interventions and our professional development with teachers. And I wonder if that's something we could think about for next year too.
Sure.
Is that more applicable to elementary sites than secondary, or is
I
that
think it might be because we use the translations a lot for parent-teacher conferences, which we have twice a year. We also use it for professional development for parents, but that's less of a concern for me because it's just a one-time, one-night thing. I think it's more the parent-teacher conferences that really cost us quite a bit of money on translators for the non-translation requirement schools where they get that extra money anyways.
Got it.
Right. There's flexibility in the LCAP for translation. It can be like translation for parents of any population. For Title III, it's only parents of English learners or immigrants. So if we start, anyway, when we move money around, we just have to remember those requirements.
Anything's possible, but once again, dominoes and everything else like that, one budget, one line item impacts another, so it's priorities. It's a need though, for sure. Yeah.
Kirsten, you said you're typically using Title I funds for that?
No, Title III, and
Oh.
when I use Title III for translation, then that's less money for me to be able to use for an intervention for my ELs or my immigrant ELs who need it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and speaking of that, actually, I want to exit, oh gosh, sorry, hang on. I want to exit out of this to share that in our parent survey, which is going out next week, we have a question that addresses that part of the LCAP. So this is the survey in English, and of course the links to Armenian and Spanish are here. We didn't do Russian. It's 2.7% of the population. So we just stuck with our other two right now. So in this survey towards the bottom, it says, I guess I went through and just to see if the check boxes worked. Okay. In which positions or programs you think the district should invest more in the LCAP supplemental grant? Check all that apply. So I gave some examples here for parents, but then they of course can click on other and then type in a suggestion. So that'll go out and it's due back. It's going out next week and due back in 2 weeks, is it?
April 12th.
Ah, here it is. It says April 12th. So then, Robin, we will let you know what the masses have said.
Perfect. I really appreciate you putting that out.
Yeah. Okay, if there's nothing else then for Dr. Andrews.
I do have one question.
Okay, Lori, speak up.
Okay, I know that statewide, we are having enrollment issues with declining enrollment.
Mhm.
Has that long-term been addressed through the LCAP? Or is that on the horizon? Because I'm
It-
sure that it's gonna affect us down the road.
It is a concern. We the state and county want us to spend the money we get in revenues for that year during that year.
Mhm.
What you're seeing as carryover is really money that was offset when we received federal COVID funds. And so that was, we needed to, those COVID dollars had to be spent with a timeline. So we spent those down first and still funded our LCAP items. But to answer your question, it's going to have to be an annual budget and looking at what we project for revenues going forward and determining our budget based off that. We are concerned about declining enrollment. We've seen our free and reduced lunch program numbers go down more so than what our overall enrollment has gone down, but we are seeing a decline in enrollment across the district as well. This is not unique to Burbank. This is LA County specifically, but also across California. So to answer your question, what does this mean long-term? It means it could be a while before we see additional funds, not only in our general fund, but also in our LCAP.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Andrews. We so appreciate that. So, and one thing that he mentioned was the paraeducators or instructional assistants. The terminology just got changed, I think, last year. So we use the terms interchangeably. It's the assistants who help in the classrooms. And it's part of our job as DELAC to review the requirements of the position and to make sure that, just to check in, make sure a district is doing, you know, what we're supposed to. And I kind of, the reason why I'm laughing is because sometimes the things that the state says that we have to review as DELAC is, I'm not quite sure of the reason behind it, but we're going to do it anyway, because it's always good to have this information. So all of our positions for paraeducators are advertised on EdJoin. Of course, we are an equal opportunity employer, and everyone who applies and meets the criteria gets interviewed. That's part of what CSEA, Classified School Employees Association, make sure it's in the contract with them. And then there's mandatory online training and fingerprinting. So for paraeducators, it used to require that they had like an AA degree or a certain number of community college units. And now that's not there, but there is successful completion of state mandated proficiency exam. So there are different exams that the state has created for different jobs. And so paraeducators basically they have to take a test in order to qualify. And then also for Burbank, we require 1 year of experience working with school-age children. So.
Did that change? Because I know that in the past, we've had some of our paraeducators or our yard supervisors have wanted to apply, and they said they had to have classroom experience.
It's just experience with kids.
Yes, I don't know if the wording changed.
It's all part of job study. The changes came down.
Okay.
What I
So-
did was I saw that there's a paraeducator job open at Disney. And so I was like, oh, this is perfect. I'll just copy and paste what the advertisement says. So are there any questions or comments? No. People who are on Zoom, please remember that you can always use the chat if you think of a question later. So I'm going to move on to the buddy system, which of course requires me to remove, let's see, manage language interpretation. I'm going to have to end, so I don't know how else to do it. and then I will add Anna back on. Okay, Nuria, can you speak now?
Hello, hello,
Yay, we can hear you. Let me just do interpretation for
Anna.
Anna. Okay, Anna, you should be okay. All right, Nuria, go ahead.
Okay, let me put the clock, no? I have like 10 minutes. I always overdo it, so let me put the alarm. Wait. There. Starting, okay?
Mhm.
Well, in regards to the buddy system, which is sistema de cuates en español, for those of you that are not acquainted with this, the system, this was brought up in 2018 at one of our DELAC board presentations with Jennifer. And the objective of this was to close the gaps that hinder the successful integration of newcomers to the district at all levels. And we saw this because we started to see that the main reasons why the process of immigrants or newcomers integration is delayed, and it is because of the language barriers and obviously the cultural barriers. So there was a great disconnection between both sides, no, the parents and staff. And also we realized that the staff usually is focused or needs to be focused to fulfill their objectives and efforts that contribute to the academic achievement of the students as it is, no? And providing them the adequate services. And some of the feedback we received was that all this disconnection originates frustration, misunderstandings. Some of the newcomers feel that there's disorientation or isolation. So there's a sense of not belonging. And it also takes time for them to adapt and assimilate and know how to communicate or navigate in new cultures, systems, services, etc. No? So that's the main background of why we started to find this viable for the community. So last year, in one of those off the record conversations with the ELD specialists and with Jennifer, I said, okay, why don't we pilot this? No, because we need to try it out to see what comes out of it. Because if we plan, we're never gonna know. So I was like the guinea pig here. So the process was that the ELD specialist would send me certain parents, and I would talk to them and see how this worked. So as I called them, I realized, and that's where it comes with the findings. This is, como dicen en campo, no? To see what happens. So I realized, talking to the parents, the communication has to be very light. And depending on how the conversation flows, you start asking questions, but you also have to make sure that the questions are like ask the right things, no? For example, if you're talking how long they've been in the country, I asked them, okay, well, how has your transition been so far? What have you learned? What difference do you see culturally? So that's where you start the conversation, okay? And you ask them, okay, what have you done for a living? Because I realized that asking that question, there's so many talents out there that can be shared with our community, especially when we're finding volunteers for the schools. It's good to know what they actually can share with us, with the community. And another thing is food. Food is the way to connect in the Latin American community. So if you want connection, talk about food. Yeah, as simple as that.
Oh, sorry.
And no, it's okay. And also it's a way of bonding. I try to connect, for example, if I had one buddy that was Peruvian, or from Peru, I would connect it with another mom from Peru, so that there would be more connection because of the countries they come from. Also, some parents would say, I need tutoring, I can't find tutoring, so I would help them. And one thing I did realize that it's like a fine line. Sometimes when you have to also be careful as a buddy parent when they start taking you kind of like a psychologist. And that's a very fine line. Because there's a point where you can be comforting, but then there's a point where you can't be, because you're not specialized in that profession. So that's a very fine line I found in this year that I've been trying this out. What they need is to be listened to. The buddy parent has to have a lot of patience, because sometimes it's a lot of talk, no? And you really have to find the patience to listen. But there's also the magic that from the conversation you can inspire them, and they want to do more. They want to go out and get jobs, and they feel empowered. Another aspect I saw is when I asked them what in their ideal world would mean to be supported, immediately they opened up, because that made them feel comforted. And another aspect was one of the parents, for the second time I've heard, is that their child feels incompetent to go to college. So that's why they don't consider college. I thought this was quite interesting, in the sense that maybe counselors should encourage more that it's possible to go to college. You're not incompetent. This is the second time I hear it. Another aspect I learned from all these conversations is that some kids don't make progress in their work or homework because it accumulates, and it's because they procrastinate because of the language barriers they don't understand. So then it builds up so much that it becomes unattainable. You never catch up with your work. And so then you go into a cycle of evading and procrastinating more. Then comes boredom. And then they start to have behavioral issues at school, and then disruption because of that boredom. I thought this was quite interesting. Another aspect that I would like to point out is some were not interested in buddy help. It's just like it happens, you know? Mm-hmm. And we as buddy parents or as staff, we have to realize that there's people that just simply don't want to be involved in school. That's all. They don't really, it's not their thing. So we have to know when to stop and give them their space. There's still another finding is there's still some misunderstandings about the ELD program and the special education evaluations. They still think it's a stigma, like a stamp on a cow that it's never going to go away. So they're reluctant to be put into these boxes. So I think that's important for the staff to take all those stigmas out and make a point that all this is supportive. Because I mean, we give all the information, but there's still that stigma. And it also goes from mouth to mouth. If one parent says, no, they're going to classify your student as this and that, and it goes around, it's sidewalk talks. Also realize that even if it's stressing times, we have to still make an effort to stay sensible or receptive to how the newcomers or will be sensitive to what they're going through. And I know sometimes we have a fast-paced work, but they still feel like they're not taken care of.
Nuria, in the interest of time, what do you think are the next steps? I think you only have like 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, in all of this, I think we need to build and establish what the attributes of the parent buddy should have. We definitely need to, between parent buddies and staff, we need to have like a small training of how to approach, for example. And we have to realize that we have to build a structure, but we shouldn't make it so complicated because the buddy system is something light. It's just like a bridge to prepare the parents to interact with staff and start integrating. So we shouldn't make this complicated.
Mhm.
It should be simple because the buddy parent has to facilitate the way or pave the way. So the next steps is to build a very simple and practical system or structure or strategy so that we get the information. And one thing, we have to set some rules, and this is important to share. We have to know what the limits and limitations of this system is, because we have to be very cautious that there's certain information we can't give because it's part of staff's knowledge, not
Mhm.
the parent knowledge. So it's important to set those limits and clarify them so that whoever's the buddy parent doesn't go overboard and that knows both sides.
Right, right.
It is very important. And the 3, 5, or 10-1, I think that somebody that doesn't want to be too committed but do help should have 3 parents assigned. Somebody that has more time, but no one buddy parent shouldn't have more than 10, definitely.
Oh, that would be, yeah. Sorry, I just have to say that.
But there, like, for example, for me, it's no trouble because I like doing this and it's part, no?
Mhm.
But yes, we have to set the limits and it should be a little more formalized. I would like to set or send a report to you and Peter and maybe even Robin that's looking at this with more details of my findings.
Mhm.
And I think we should have a sit down, Jen, and build like a structure, a simple
Yes.
structure, so that we can then share with ELD specialists and principals, and because the ELD specialists are the ones that are more close to the newcomers, and obviously the principal, because the principals have their own systems within the school, and then we go from there and see what they suggest.
Right. So thank you.
Thank you. I hope
the-
you like my presentation. If you have questions, please write them in the chat.
Yes, exactly. You can write them in the chat. I also texted Kirsten, who's taking our minutes, and asked her to put a note in our minutes, just a personal note for me to contact the school that my daughter was at, because in 9th grade, they had a parent buddy system for new 9th grade parents. And I was one of those parents who did not take advantage of it. I already had a student or a child who was in 12th grade, so I'd already been through 9th grade. I might have availed myself of it had I known about it for my older child, but it's always reassuring to have that kind of parent-to-parent support. So.
Okay, and also send me parents. I ran out, like they communicate with me, but I wait for them to communicate. Like I'm not, so send me more.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nuria. And speaking of parent to parent, Mona wasn't able to be here today, so I'm going to share what we have coming up. This is just a one-time event. Hopefully there's a lot of interest in it. And we at this fair, Nuria, if you're able to be there with me, then we're going to have a DELAC like district kind of booth or whatever. And we can share, if parents come up and ask us about the ELD program, I can talk about that. If they ask about a need to connect with other immigrant parents for like a buddy system, if you're able to be there, Nuria, you can speak to that too. But I don't know, it's 3 hours.
No, yeah, actually my son wants to volunteer for translating for, like I said, an
Great.
ambassador.
I emailed all the families last night.
So yeah, you can count on me unless anything else happens.
Okay, thanks. So on April 20th at Burroughs on Memorial Field, which is the big football field on the corner of, oh, help me out, Verdugo and Parish. we're gonna have both entrances open, the visitor and the home. We're gonna have both concession stands open. We're not selling food. They're just going to be giving food away to people who are there. We will have booths set up along the track from different community organizations, like the Kids Community Dental Clinic, our Burbank Public Library, the adult school will have a booth. Lenora, our awesome nurse, will have a first aid booth. And so I really hope people can come. Yesterday afternoon, I sent out a link to all the parents of all the TK and K students, all the immigrants from the last 3 years, and all of our English learners. And so they got the link so that they can sign up. And one of the questions on the form was, would you like a student ambassador to help with translation? So then I also sent out an email to all of the students in the district in grades 7 through 12 who speak another language and said, hey, do you want service learning hours? Sign up. And so we'll see how it all comes together. But we're really excited about having this opportunity, and the organization and the majority of the work that's going into this is from Burbank Council PTA. So, which is perfect, because as Nuria was saying, with the parent to parent connection, it's something that, like as a parent of, anyway, you understand what I'm saying, that hopefully you understand those at home that, or online, that the parent to parent connection is something that's so important and so valuable. And so then being able to share with parents what we have in our community just, helps them not feel disconnected. It helps them to feel connected. That's what I mean to say. So if there are no questions about that, here is the district contact information. So if you have any questions about the ELD program or state and federal programs, Peter is the person to reach out to. If you have questions about LCAP or instructional technology, Robin is the person to reach out to. And if you want to know anything about ELD, contact me or your ELD specialist or coordinator. So I'm going to stop sharing to allow if there are any people online who'd like to ask a question or share a comment, suggestion, or concern. We're open for public comments. Yes, Nuria?
I know I consistently say this and it might sound cheesy, but nowadays that there's more stress, there's more hostility, is the time where we should be more emphatic on having good relations between all of us. And and through my work, I've seen that it's just a matter of being patient and willing to say like the right words at that moment, or say, how is your day, or how are you feeling, and looking at people in the eyes. It helps a lot. And you start building, we need strong community, and everything will start blossoming. It's just a matter of taking the time, just 2 minutes to really connect with everybody, and you build a good culture now more than ever. Because now everybody's like, no, this guy in the car, and then you get to your workplace all hostile. So yeah, I just want to say we have to make an effort, even if it's stressful at times.
Yep, very much so. Anna, I saw that, Anna Tagmazian, I saw that you turned your camera on. Was that so you could ask a question or make a comment?
No, just
so we can see
I
your
don't have any
face.
questions.
Thanks.
I think I agree with Nuria. It is very important to actually reach out as a community liaison. I think it's very important, especially for the newcomers, as soon as they come in, to reach out and at least smile and just let them know that you're there for them, And I think it's that first approach and first hello that makes a big difference. And basically you build a trust. And it doesn't have to be someone who's a newcomer. It could be anyone who's new at school, you know, just smile. And I think that makes a big difference.
I just want to echo what you're saying because I agree with you. It can be a smile, the smallest gesture can make a huge difference that can help to build a lasting positive relationship. So thank you for saying that.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, that's great. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I forgot to say, hey, I'm recording the meeting, but you all got that notice in the beginning of the meeting. And so I will post this on the district website once it's ready from Zoom. And this is our last meeting of the year, as far as I know. Unless all of a sudden, like, you know, I don't know, we win the lottery. Isn't it in the billions now? I don't know. Okay, I'm just kidding. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.